Hello everyone and welcome to Set the Westworld on Fire, episode numero 10, the final episode of this season of Westworld and Set the Westworld on Fire.
And what a season it was, man, and what an episode it was last night, too.
What an episode indeed. It was titled the Bicameral Mind. Man. It was titled the Bicameral Man, which is a psychological theory that suggests that early man had two sides of their brain that spoke to each other, but they didn't realize it was actually part of the same brain. They thought it was like one side spoke and the other side listened, where today we realize that that's actually our conscience telling us things to do, right and wrong, and just, thinking about things in your head. They didn't realize that back then. They thought it was something else talking to them. And that plays a key part. It's kind of played a key part throughout the whole season, but it definitely plays a big key part in this particular episode.
You're absolutely right, Ryan. I mean, and going back to it, I mean, even though the bicameral mind is kind of more of an outdated term in terms of psychology, this was not the case for Westworld, Ryan. I mean, there were twists and turns. Theories were either proven or disproven, and we have a lot to cover tonight. So why don't we get to it?
Lots of questions answered. So we'll just address the elephant in the room here right off the bat, and William is the man in black.
Called it.
Well, you didn't call it,
not just really me, but
the internet called it.
Yeah. But I think we were starting to get the suspicion of that, Ryan, especially since the previous episode, that this was a theory that was likely going to be proven. And I'll give the show credit. I thought they revealed his identity in a very tasteful way. I know we spoke, and I know you were not going to be a fan of this theory if it was proven, but what did you think of it overall?
Well, I thought that, okay, so first off, I had the feeling that, he was going to be the man in black all the way back when he chose the white hat over the black hat, but I kept hoping that they were going to do something different with it, because they were laying it on way too thick in order for it to be, in order for them to just pull it as some sort of huge twist, because it really wasn't. It was so projected, especially in last episode, and even a little bit before that too, where it was like, well, if this guy doesn't turn out to be the man in black, there's no other character that can really do that. I guess it could have been Logan, but you weren't really getting the dynamic of Logan's character. He was just a dick.
Right.
Whereas William was like, well, they're focusing a lot on him, and when they clearly show that there was multiple moments in the timeline happening, there had to have been something that going on there. And I kept hoping that it was going to be some sort of different twist, but it didn't end up being that. It ended up being, the Man in Black situation. And while I was a little bit disappointed in that, it almost took a back seat to this entire episode, because was way more going on than that. They didn't just pin everything on that one reveal.
Right, Ryan, and I'll have to admit, when it was first coming to the big reveal regarding the Man in Black, at one point I was thinking, once he was telling his story, I was waiting for the shocker that it actually was Logan and that William somehow was killed in Westworld. However, I think that would have been a little hokey if they did go that route, but I thought. Overall, I thought it was like I said, it was very tastefully done, and it was just a devastating moment for Dolores, because the person that she loves, or she remembers loving, which it has now turned into this monster, and you just see, her reaction is one of pure disgust and utter shock, depression, it was really one of the more devastating moments we've had on the show. Even though we could say we saw it coming, Westworld did a great job at leading to the delivery up to this scene, or at least they did in this episode.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot going on in that particular scene, not just the reveal of the Man in Black and Dolores' reaction to it, but you also had Dolores' realization about the maze, what it actually is, and her purpose in everything that's going on in Westworld. And at the same time, the Man in Black's just total, like being crushed by the fact that the maze isn't really anything that he can really seek, because it's, as they've said all along, the maze isn't for him. It's for the hosts.
Right. That's kind of what I was just about to touch on, Ryan. I mean, can you imagine the Man in Black has been in this Westworld, or has been coming to Westworld for over 30 years. And don't get me wrong, the scene with William, like in the final scene of him of his younger self, was devastating when it found out Dolores just reset and has no memory of him. I mean, I don't know what's more devastating, that he searched the entire park to find her only to realize she is now forgotten, or that or whether he realizes the maze was never actually for him and he just spent all this time looking for it. I mean, it's both crushing. I mean, the latter is obviously more for our personal enjoyment, but it really does show how Westworld can really, for many characters, can just tear your heart out, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think it's like just one thing after another with William, which is more or less why he ended up going down the path that he did, where it's just one defeat after defeat after defeat. And really the only thing that he can really say that he probably accomplished was whatever ended up happening with Logan, because we see him, naked on the horse,
butt ass naked,
yeah, tied up, riding, being forced out on the horse into the open wilderness or whatever, and we don't really know what happened. Like, I mean, you can assume that he probably didn't make it, but you don't know that for sure.
Something tells me, Ryan, he actually made it, because otherwise, how is William going to explain to his family, regardless of the fact that Logan is a loose cannon, as he so elegantly put in this episode, that, their son died in Westworld? That's not going to be a good story to tell his fiance or his father-in-law that runs the company.
I don't know. I guess, on the other hand, how does he convince the father that he should be the one that takes over the company and not his son, even though, he can say that he's a loose cannon and everything like that, but what's that mean if Logan's there to refute it?
I don't know. I mean, he probably is going to try to go to his father and state that he's marrying into the family and that his son, or his future brother-in-law, is really Sonny Corleone. So we all know what happened to Sonny Corleone. So
yeah,
I mean, that could be a possibility. But
I think that William is actually still out there in Westworld.
You mean Logan?
Logan, yes. I think Logan is still out there in Westworld, and we're going to find him. Around the same age as the Man in Black, where he's gonna reappear in later seasons, whether it's next season or the season after or something like that.
Maybe Al Pacino will play Logan.
Maybe. I think Al Pacino looks more like Logan than Billy Simpson looks like Ed Harris.
I mean, yeah, it's true. But then again, when you got 30 years on you, some people don't age gracefully, Ryan.
No. So there was that, and at this moment, this is when, of course, Dolores is realizing, like we said before, her purpose and the fact that Arnold had actually planted the maze as more of a way to get her to form her own consciousness. He realized that it wasn't as simple as the pyramid that they had mentioned before, but rather more of a journey that the hosts had to go on in order to find themselves. And in this moment that she's realizing all of this, this is when the Man in Black is harassing her. And I guess we can call him William now.
Yes.
I don't know if we're going to see more of the William from the past. That could get a little confusing, but I'm not sure. Well, I guess we'll figure that out on the way. And so, he's kind of still trying to force her to, now at this point, he's trying to find Wyatt because he thinks now that this is the next piece of the puzzle. And Dolores just kind of snaps on him. She gets that look in her eye and then basically beats his ass. Breaks his arm.
In quite a dramatic fashion, too.
Yeah, breaks his arm and definitely bests him. And unfortunately, she hesitates at the moment where she would actually kill him, and he ends up stabbing her. And this is an important part, as well as the later on we see Maeve and Hector and Armistice breaking out. But it's important to note, and this is probably going to be a big important thing to remember for the future, is that these hosts are far more powerful than humans.
Oh, absolutely, Ryan. I mean, these hosts are reminiscent of the replicants from Blade Runner, I would say, Ryan.
It reminds me more of the Terminator.
Actually, I was just about to say possibly the Terminator, but I think not quite as powerful.
Specifically, the scene with Armistice reminded me so much of the female Terminator from Terminator 3.
Ah, yes.
That scene, the look in her eye and the way that she behaved was so reminiscent of that for me. I was like, wow, this is like watching that movie almost, but in Westworld instead of the movie.
And again, Ryan, that was such an excellent action scene. Like, that was probably the top action scene, or at least one of the top 3 all season. I mean, it was just Armistice and who's the other guy again, Ryan? Armistice and Hector, excuse me. Yep. Just mowing down the security guards, trying to get Maeve to safety and for her escape. But I mean, that was something. And did you see the post-credit scene at the end?
Yeah, I know. We'll talk about that in a little while. The only thing that I didn't really understand about that is, these security guards were so inept. Like, you can't take down 2 hosts with like a squad of machine gun toting security guys.
Yeah, but Ryan, let's be honest. These security guys don't have much to do, and sometimes when you don't have much to do and they weren't prepared for highly advanced hosts, well, I mean, you're just going to screw around.
It's the Stormtrooper conundrum where no matter what you do, they're just going to miss every shot.
Exactly. So, and you would think that, they would at least try to keep their skills sharp, but if they're just sitting around all day like prison guards, they probably forgot some of their training, henceforth why they were so ineffective.
Even they're seeing all their comrades die, and then they're still trying to say things like, halt all motor functions, and everything. I don't know. Just that part of it was like, I like the action scene and everything like that, but there was definitely an air of like, come on, they're just going to wipe out all of these guys.
Well, Ryan, let's be honest. These guys are third-rate SWAT cops against 2 Terminators, basically. So I think because of their lethality and what their characteristics are, I think that it's not so much of a far-fetched conclusion that these guys could just get mowed down by those 2.
Okay, so let's go back to the Dolores and Arnold story here. Because that we didn't talk about everything that went on there because there was a lot of reveals there. We had the scene where Arnold was explaining the maze to Dolores, and then it's later revealed that Arnold in the past had been using Dolores and Teddy to destroy all the hosts in hopes to stop Westworld from ever opening. And Dolores's like evil streak inside of her aggressive streak is attributed to Arnold merging the Wyatt consciousness with Dolores.
Mm-hmm.
So now we know that Wyatt doesn't actually exist. Well, he does, but he's inside of Dolores and isn't his own like a standalone host.
Right, it's like a split personality almost.
Yeah. He did this, like I said, in hopes to stop Westworld from ever opening, because he was realizing that Dolores was forming a consciousness and becoming a human, more or less. And this is that scene that we've seen several times where Teddy is, well, first it's Wyatt killing a bunch of people, and then it's Teddy killing a bunch of people, and then the full scene comes into fruition here where it is Teddy killing people, it's also Dolores killing people, and then the general that we saw get shot in last episode or the episode before is actually Arnold getting shot by Dolores, and that was how Arnold died.
Pretty much, Ryan. But before Arnold died, he also revealed what he was trying to instill into Dolores as well, which was true consciousness, and how it relates to the maze, basically. Because Arnold believed that the path to consciousness is not linear like he made for the pyramid that people saw, but is instead more like a maze where people's choices take them either closer or further from the exact center where their destination is.
Yeah, that's what I explained before, where it's like a journey more than just a straight shot to the top. It's all about their experiences and their choices that lead them to basically who they are.
Right.
And so this scene was important because I guess that you could consider it at this point the first time that a host has killed a human, which was Dolores killing Arnold. But at the same time, it wasn't of free will. Arnold was the one that programmed Dolores to do that. That kind of more or less wraps up these past timelines that are going on. We'll probably touch back on them a little bit here and there as they fit into other stories. But when we were talking about the Man in Black and Dolores fighting, the Man in Black does stab Dolores, and Teddy actually ends up coming to her rescue. The heroic Teddy on the horse, finally finding his way to the battlefield, so to speak. And this was the interesting. This is where I think my favorite part of the whole episode is where instead of taking her to the hospital or a doctor, Dolores asks him to take her to where the mountain meets the ocean, which they had talked about before in one of the other episodes.
To be honest, Ryan, I mean, you really can't find a doctor out there, or at least in that time setting. So, and the wound looked pretty fatal for since they're trying to simulate real life wounds with the host. So there seems to be no other better place than to take her to the place they always wanted to go.
Sure. And then so they get there, and it's nightfall, and it's like this big dramatic scene where they're talking to each other, and it's all emotional and everything. And then Dolores passes away, and he basically looks into the camera and delivers and now it's the beginning of a new chapter. And the camera pans out, and this is all a performance for the board of directors, and an introduction to Ford's new narrative.
Yeah, Ryan, when I first saw that, I had this stomach dropping feeling of disbelief. Like, I mean, now when I think about it, it sounds like the ending to a cheesy 1950s movie, I guess. But
yeah,
I mean,
like a Twilight Zone or something.
Right. Like the hero just lost his girl, and then he doesn't end it by breaking down. He ends it by giving this big speech to the sky that nobody can hear.
Yeah. And that's what we learned on this episode of the Twilight Zone or something like that. And yeah, so this is kind of like the moment where you realize that almost everything going on here is Ford's doing. Everything that like the whole series of events that leads them to go to this beach, we find out that he's actually the one that's controlling Maeve, and then we even find out later on that he's the one that's continuing to push Dolores toward consciousness.
Right, because Ryan, we figured out that Ford really did believe in Arnold's side. He really wanted these hosts to gain consciousness. Now, again, does this make Ford a good guy? Absolutely not, because again, he's done many despicable acts throughout the show, and he's a master manipulator. But I mean, it was an interesting turn of events that was actually very believable, because he truly loves these creations, and it's. I don't know. I thought it was a very good reveal. It was. I mean, I wouldn't say it was necessarily shocking, but surprising.
Yeah.
That.
I think it was just like a confirmation of like, you have no idea what is and isn't under Ford's control. Like the whole time I had been suspecting that just about everything that was going on was in some way tied into his quote unquote new narrative. And this kind of like, in terms of at least the whole Teddy Dolores situation, and we find out Maeve later on, these bits are at least under his control.
Right, but I mean, and again, Ryan, let's not forget what Ford said. Ford said that he wanted these hosts to be conscious, but to have them escape, which I'm assuming it means escape from Westworld, they have to experience real pain and heartache and sacrifice. And he didn't think that Bernard was ready or Dolores was ready, and
I'm not sure exactly what he's referring to there. If he's actually talking about real sacrifice or some sort of symbolic situation that's going to happen down the road, not really sure. Because he does give that speech to Bernard. So this was after he had revealed that that he had been working to get Dolores to be the first, basically self-aware host by
yes.
Reinforcing these memories and allowing the voice of Arnold to continue to talk to Dolores and push her on her journey. And then he does a little spiel about the Michelangelo's painting on the Sistine Chapel, the God. The image of God is actually inside of a brain. If you look at it, it looks like the shape of a brain. So that's suggesting that, the divine isn't something high up above that we can't attain. It's actually coming from within inside our own minds, which has been early on in the season and had been talked about. One of the main problems with giving the host some sort of consciousness or like a voice inside of their mind was that they either went down the road of like hopefully developing consciousness or realizing it was themselves talking to themselves, or they went down the road of thinking it was some sort of God up on high giving them divine wisdom or something like that.
Right. All I can say is, Ryan, is that I will never look at Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel painting the same way ever again.
Oh, no, every time I look at it now, I'm just going to see the brain shape there.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. It's like whether or not it's actually intentional or not, in that scenario, it would have been like, imagine back then, Michelangelo was a pretty liberal artist, and coming up with that sort of like embedded symbolism and sneaking it past is pretty interesting to think about.
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting subliminal message if what Ford said is true, Ryan. There's no denying that. But he does actually present a lot of good points. He believes that like you mentioned, true change doesn't necessarily come to divine intervention. It comes from within, and you can apply that with Ford because he doesn't. It shows that I don't think he sees himself necessarily as this God, but a man who has created possibly more. Who's added life to Earth. So perhaps he feels like God is not the only one to give life, that he thinks humans can now do it as well, and he uses the host as an example.
So during this process, this meeting. This is going on down inside that lab underneath the church that we had visited in the previous episode. Dolores is left alone to kind of contemplate everything she had just been delivered, and she ends up sitting down in the room where she had normally been talking back and forth with Arnold. When she sits down, she hears the voice inside her head, and it slowly turns from Arnold's into her own voice. And then she sees herself sitting across from herself, and that's kind of like the symbolism of her consciousness forming and her realizing that it's actually her, all part of her one brain, telling her what to do and things like that, like a normal human would have their consciousness in the back of their head kind of guiding their actions and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the dawning of life, I guess you would say, inside of Westworld, the first, which reinforces the idea of, all along, Dolores was the most advanced host here, and even though Maeve is showing a lot of potential, all of that's kind of like artificially forced. I mean, she's definitely advanced, but she's not advanced to the point where she can start making her own decisions and form her own consciousness.
No, you're right. Maeve is following a narrative, and she's been and again, like you mentioned, the episode has revealed that, which again, another shocking moment. But Dolores, like you said, Ryan, is now making her own choices, and this shows now that she is gaining sentience, and she's going to be a true AI of sorts, or she's in the process of becoming a true AI.
And all while this particular situation is going on, back in the the underworkings of Westworld, where all of the control is going on and the hosts are being stored and everything like that, Maeve and Hector and Armistice, they are escaping. And of course, we mentioned earlier about that particular escape where Armistice, she bites the finger off of one of the lab techs, and then Hector, the lab tech that had been filmed violating the hosts, gets pretty much the most gruesome death that this show's ever had. Just that big bone saw like shoved through his chest.
Well, Ryan, let's be honest. I mean, if you were one of the hosts and that technician was about to do what you think he was about to do, I think you might possibly react in a somewhat similar way.
Yeah, show a little bit of prejudice. And yeah, so there was that scene, and then of course the security forces start showing up, and Hector and Armistice, they end up getting a hold of some machine guns, and we're kind of pleasantly surprised with the effect that the machine guns had over their normal pistols, because they were just able to mow down tons of these security forces where, with a regular 6-shooter it would be a little bit more difficult.
Well, they were like kids in a candy shop, Ryan, just mowing down the Westworld security forces.
Mm-hmm. And then there's a scene where Armistice actually gets her arm caught in a doorway. And this is, I guess I should pedal back a little bit and mention that as they're doing their daring escape, they stumble into a place called SW.
SW, Ryan.
And
you can just barely see it.
Yeah, it looks similar to the normal logo, the Westworld logo, except when they go in, there's a bunch of samurais there, presumably hosts, engaging in duels and things like that, and we have a whole nother world that we've just been revealed to us.
Samurai World, yep, or Shogun World, or something like that.
Yeah, Samurai World, or Shogun World, whatever they end up going with it. That era of Japanese history, and this kind of answers one of the bigger questions that people were having, especially in relation to the original movie, which featured different worlds. Are there different parks? Are there different places that are are similar to Westworld but have different themes, and this confirms that there actually are. Not a whole lot is really shown. You just see some of the samurai armor and some of the hosts engaging in duels and things like that. But it does confirm that the possibility of later seasons having more to do with other parks rather than just Westworld.
Right. And to be fair, though, Ryan, too, if this was another world, it would be completely different from the previous film series because they didn't have a Japanese or samurai themed park for this. So it would be an entirely different creation for this.
Yeah.
Which, hey, that'd be interesting.
It's in the same vein as the idea behind the original.
Right.
And yeah, who knows how many parks there are. There could be 50. My number one question is Ford the mastermind of all of these parks? Or is he just in charge of Westworld? And is there a whole nother board of directors, a whole nother group of overseers that focus on Samurai World and whatever other worlds that may exist?
Well, Ryan, I think that's a really good question. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Ford was the mastermind behind the whole thing. I mean, he was the one was one of the creators, aside from Arnold, who created these hosts in the first place. So it's possible that he's the one who's sponsored this whole other theme park and possibly multiple other theme parks. But I mean, again, that's going to be a question we'll have for next season, really.
Yeah, I'm interested to see where they go down that road. So we'll quickly wrap up Maeve's storyline here because hers does have a kind of a cliffhanger. So during their escape, so this whole time, I forgot to mention, Felix is also with them. That's the technician that's been helping them along the way.
And he had a very subtly humorous scene, Ryan, when they
yes.
Shall I reveal it or?
So, well, yeah, I'll set it up. So they go down into where they're storing all of the decommissioned hosts, and they find Bernard there on the ground after he had shot himself. And in this moment, this is when Felix realizes that Bernard was a host, and so he kind of like starts acting like a robot. Like,
no, he's looking at his own hands. Yeah, he's looking at his own hands, and Maeve's like, "Don't be fucking stupid. You're not one of us."
Yeah. So just his little,
it was a much needed scene of humor for just this pulse pounding episode, Ryan.
Exactly. Yeah, it was just a little break in the action for a little bit of comic relief, and yeah. So they find Bernard down there and they just fix him.
Yeah, I know. Isn't that weird? He shot himself in the head, which I mean, in a computer sense, I figured that would be where his memory chip is. Everything, yeah, and he's just able to fix him like in like very little time.
Yeah, it makes so this two questions here. One is, so how can we be sure if anyone ever dies? And two, how do we know that the hosts are not just programmed to think they die when they're, say, like stabbed in the gut or shot in the head or something like that, and maybe they don't actually get like actual serious life-ending wounds, and maybe it's just programming? So later on we may find out that these hosts can be like severely damaged, way more than we've seen, and still continue on if they can overcome that level of programming. I'm just wondering what kind of long-term implications that has.
Well, to try to answer your question, Ryan, how do we know? Do we know for sure if they can truly die? The answer to your question is that we don't know. That's what it comes down to. How could they die? I don't know. If you push them off push them off into a volcano, throw a grenade in them, anything other than that, Ryan? I think that's a really good question. I mean, it's entirely possible that these that the host could be like similar to, like, say, the closest example I can find is like laser tag or paintball, where you get shot and then your gear just shuts down or something like that. And then they obviously have to repair it, or you have to do something that reactivates it. But maybe even a video game. If your character jumps off a cliff, they die, and then you just reset it, and you go right back into the action. These are the closest examples I can think of. But I mean, I think you pose a very good question, Ryan. That's how I'll end it.
Yeah, and just because with this situation, for all intents and purposes, Bernard thought he was dead. I mean, he, I guess, acted dead because his programming told him that getting shot in the head kills him, but then Felix was able to very quickly repair him. He said there was some damage, but not enough, obviously, to prevent him from functioning again.
Right, and to be fair, though, Ryan, the technicians in Westworld seem to have very advanced tools.
Sure.
And technological advances. So it's possible that there are other. I mean, we even saw one of them be used on a human too. So it's possible that this world is somewhere in the near distant future where there have been medical advances, and that, who knows?
Yeah. So I'd just be interested to see where that leads. If that's a little nugget of information they're leaving that's suggesting that as long as these hosts know that they can have more intense injuries than they believe, then they're going to be able to get away with a lot more. And then they continue their escape. Bernard, for some reason, they don't take Bernard with them. I don't know. I don't remember if that's actually explained. But, the four of them finally do reach the elevator. And... Well, actually, at this point, Armistice has gotten her arm caught. I kind of mentioned that a little bit earlier. They leave her behind because she gets her arm caught in an emergency door. So they leave her behind. We'll get back to her in a minute. And then they make it to the elevator, and it's Hector that can't make it past the elevator because Maeve has programmed him not to be able to.
What a biatch,
No
Ryan.
shit, right?
I mean, seriously. And here's the interesting thing about that scene. After that, Hector doesn't even get angry at all. He kisses Maeve and says, "I'll see you in another life." And then he prepares just to shoot everybody, obviously knowing that he's going to die in a bloodbath, similar to like what happened to John Marston in Red Dead Redemption, if we want a Western-themed thing. So, I mean, really, I mean, this is how Hector is truly a host, because a human would have probably just shot Maeve right on the spot for betrayal right there.
Yeah, that was definitely an interesting reaction from Hector. He actually did it with a smile on his face, where, like you said, any normal person would probably freak out and be like, "What the hell are you doing, betraying me like this?" And then they go down the elevator, and this is when Felix reveals to Maeve that her daughter, in her memories, is still alive. Gives her a little piece of paper that says where she can find her. And this is another confirmation that there are more than one park, because it specifically says Park 1 and then Sector something and Zone something. So that's, she's got the information, and she kind of is like, at that point, she's like, "I don't care. She's not my daughter."
Right. She's very dismissive.
Yeah, I've been programmed to think this. So she keeps the piece of paper, but just kind of loads a gun. And I thought she was going to, for a half a second, I thought she was going to shoot Felix. But I, for some reason, didn't think that was actually going to happen. I think that was the implication there, that she was loading the gun to get rid of the final piece of evidence or whatever. But she didn't end up doing that. She had a bit of a compassionate streak there. What did you think? Do you think she was going to shoot him?
Honestly, Ryan, for maybe a split second, yes, but something in me thought that because Felix is really the one responsible for helping Maeve get this far, I didn't see that as a likelihood. I think Maeve was very thankful for all the help that Felix provided. So I'm honestly not surprised that she would do this. But I mean, again, at the same time, I can see where you're coming from because, again, these people are hosts. They don't really have authentic feelings. You know what I'm saying?
Like I said, like you, I thought it just for a split second when I saw the gun. I was like, oh, she's going to shoot him. But then I thought about it. She's like, no, she's probably not because she's been right along. She's been pretty supportive of Felix and liked him quite a bit.
But then again, I mean, she could have easily killed him and tried to tie up any loose ends. So that's why I can't really dismiss that idea of hindsight. But I had a feeling she wasn't going to do that.
Yeah. So she makes it out of makes it to the train to get out of Westworld, and then she has her crisis of consciousness where she can't leave her daughter behind, so she actually gets up off the train and presumably is next season we're going to see her trying to find her daughter inside Westworld.
Now here's the question I have, Ryan. Was she following the script like what Bernard revealed to her earlier in the episode, or do you think that now she's achieving consciousness because she has maternal feelings and wants to find this host who played her daughter in multiple storylines?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I think that this is still part of Ford's programming because I don't think he would allow Maeve to leave.
Right, because I mean, again, she was following a script from the beginning. That tells me, I think that would go against what Ford meant when he wanted the host to be free, but he needed them to find their own consciousness. And because Maeve was following a script, I don't believe that he would have thought Maeve was ready and thought that it would be best suited to. That's why I'm leading more towards the former than the latter there, Ryan.
Yeah, that exactly. That's my initial inclination, but it could be a possibility. I think as long as everything goes according to plan, so to say, I think Maeve is probably going to be a big role next season in terms of like being maybe one of the other ones to form her own consciousness now that she knows that there is somebody pulling the strings. I mean, that's kind of half the battle, isn't it? Knowing that there's somebody behind the scene pulling strings, and then learning from that angle to kind of combat it and figure it out yourself sort of situation.
Right. Try to figure out who the puppet master is and then cut the strings loose and be free.
Exactly. So this whole situation with Maeve's escape and the security forces and everything like that, we know is orchestrated by Robert Ford, and this was essentially a big giant distraction to pull all of the attention and security away from the board of directors, which has been, we mentioned before, seeing the introduction of his new narrative. Now they're at this gala event where, they're all big-time rich people schmoozing each other and everything like that, enjoying Westworld, shooting hosts and whatnot.
Yeah, did you see like Teddy first shooting a glass out of the host's head, then hands one of the board members, and she actually shoots the guy.
Yeah, just like,
and Teddy's like, "Good job."
Yeah, good job. Yeah, so it was like it's basically a big carnival is what's going on. And actually, my favorite part of this was seeing the man in black, still in black, but with a bow tie, and
he was in a tux, right?
Yeah, like I said, he was in black. And with the bow tie and his broken arm just kind of limping around everywhere. Just like this total display of defeat almost. Just like, I got to do this because I'm part of the board and my arm hurts and I don't know where the maze is and Wyatt, blah, 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 blah.
Well, Ryan, you know what Winston Churchill once said? I drink in victory because I deserve it and defeat because I need it. And he certainly needed it.
Oh, yeah. So I guess I should have mentioned this earlier, because this was, as soon as this scene happened, I knew exactly what was going to happen eventually in the episode. Charlotte Hale meets with Robert Ford and is like, basically says, the board has voted you out, and at tonight's event you get to introduce your narrative, and then later on you have to announce your retirement. And Ford is just kind of like, all right, see you later.
He handles it very eloquently, Ryan, I would say.
And as soon as there was any indication that the entire board of directors was at Westworld, I immediately knew that Robert Ford was going to have them all killed.
I think that was a foregone conclusion, Ryan, or at least I started suspecting it, because right during that, this whole gala in Westworld, like you stated, I just had thoughts reminiscent of the Red Wedding from Game of Thrones, and my heart was just pounding seeing what was going to happen, just indulging all of it.
Yeah,
I don't know if you felt a similar way, but
yeah, well, like I said, is that meeting which happened pretty close to the beginning of the episode. I was like, oh, he's just gonna have them all killed. I don't know. I figured it was going to be, something related to all the hosts. I just didn't know exactly how it was all going to go down. And then I see this big scene with all this fancy stuff going on and hosts dotted here and there. And then we have Robert giving his big speech about how humans can't change because they're just human, but the hosts have the ability to change and things like that. And all along this speech, Dolores is walking around. She had just realized that she has consciousness, and she's all of these pieces of the puzzle are kind of coming together, where all these things like people saying this world isn't for them, it's for us, and realizing about the maze and everything like that. And she walks up on the stage, and just as she did with Arnold, she shoots Ford in the back of the head.
Now that was shocking, Ryan. Like, I was just like, what the fuck? Like, serious, like you just didn't expect that to happen. It was just pulse pounding. I just could not believe what I was seeing.
Yep.
And again, again, there was, going back at it, there's one line of dialogue I like to read. This was the last part of his monologue. It said, "An old friend once told me something that gave me comfort, something he read. He said that Mozart, Beethoven, and Chopin never died. They simply became music. So I hope you will enjoy this last piece very much." And then boom.
Yep.
So I found that a very an interesting point, Ryan.
Yep, that was his last word, so to speak. And then that triggers what we had probably been assuming what is going to go on throughout the whole season, and that's the host revolt. And Dolores, she's the only one at the gala that you see shooting. She's just shooting basically randomly into the crowd of all of the board members. And at this point, the man in black has kind of stumbled away drunkenly, and all of a sudden, all of these decommissioned hosts come walking out of the woods.
I wonder if they're still butt ass naked, Ryan.
No, they had clothes on.
Oh.
Yeah,
I
were
I might have missed that, but it was amazing too, because the man in black, you would think he'd run, but no, he just smiles because earlier he said, the Westworld there was no point in Westworld because because the hosts can't kill you, or they basically, the humans are invincible to the hosts. But now the man in black just has this big smile because now the game is real and the stakes are raised. So
he gets shot. He gets shot in the arm. It's not revealed whether or not he dies or not, but it's assumed that he doesn't, because all that happens is he gets shot in the arm. And I guess it's safe to assume that everyone else at that gala was probably killed. And the only other survivor that we know of is Lee, who was on his little mission to get the Abernathy host out of Westworld with the data that he needed, and he, much to his chagrin, finds a vault full of nothingness, because all of the decommissioned hosts are now out killing all of the board members.
Oof.
So he's left with his dick in his hand, kind of a loss for words, that's for sure.
He was probably like, oh, shit.
Yep. But he lived.
Yeah, sadly he did, Ryan. And I know he was one of the more annoying characters, I think, in the show. But I think he was also a vital character in some ways, Ryan.
And I'm just wondering, like, what's his role going to be moving forward if he's... I would not have pegged him as one of the people to survive something like that, like a big annihilation of a lot of the human characters. Like, what's his role going to be in the next season or in the future?
The slave of the hosts? I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Yeah, it's going to be real interesting to see where this goes, because this has kind of set up a total pivot on what this show has been up to this point. Because you're basically erasing all preconceived notions of what Westworld is by taking out essentially the human element and making it a fully host-controlled environment.
Right. Well, I think Ryan, it goes back to what Ford was saying, that even he believed in Arnold's vision, but he needed to do it slowly, and he needed to build the hosts to have them find their own consciousness. So I think that in essence, I think what my theory is that Westworld is more like a prison than anything to the hosts, at least. So I think now that when you remove the human element, like you were saying, it gives them the opportunity to possibly find their own consciousness and eventually escape Westworld and go into the real world. But how they will act, that is the mystery. Now, feel free to disagree with me on this.
Yeah, I'm not sure like at what point we're going to see them actually going out into the real world. I think we're kind of a ways away from that. I think next season is probably going to focus on them. I wonder if it's going to be like them trying to build some sort of utopia at Westworld where, it's all hosts 24/7 trying to build a perfect society based around that notion that it's just hosts at least in the leadership role,
Sure, like they're trying to establish a civilization, essentially.
Yeah, their own nation almost. And how the other parks are going to fit into that, I don't know. I don't know how they're going to address the fact that presumably guests are going to keep arriving at Westworld. I mean, guests are already there at Westworld. Is it just going to be a giant purge of all of the humans that are already there and then some sort of systematic purging of everybody that arrives? I don't really know where that's going to go, or even if it'll be addressed like in a big way. It may just be like season 2 starts and we're like 2 years down the road or something like that. I don't know if it'll be like a straight canonical, this season ends and then the second season picks up exactly where this last season ended.
I don't know, Ryan. I mean, I think it's possible that this season picks up a few years after this event and maybe even goes into flashbacks of what happened immediately afterwards. That could be one possibility. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of different ways this place can go. Yeah. But, I mean, it's going to be fun to guess, Ryan, just like it has been all season. And, I'm going to be really sad to miss it's going to be sad not being able to watch more episodes this season. It was a great 10 weeks, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, it was definitely the best, potentially new show that I've seen in a long time, and probably since Game of Thrones. Yeah, it has been confirmed, unfortunately, that we won't be seeing the next season until 2018. So it's going to be a long wait for season 2 of Westworld.
Yeah, well, hopefully it's just about a year and a half, Ryan. I mean, or at least I hope they come back, I don't know, January of 2018. But again, when you have something, when you have something like Westworld, Ryan, I mean, I mean, HBO is trying to improve their lineup, so they want to get it right. They don't want to rush anything unfinished because that would be a travesty to their fans and for the and especially for the cast.
So for me, the ending of this season was actually exactly what I wanted. I wanted there to be the revolt. I thought it was going to be Maeve at the helm, but it ended up being Ford actually killing himself, basically. And as I had said before, I thought it would be a really good show of confidence and a real good twist to have Ford die in this episode, and he did.
Right. I mean, going back to Game of Thrones, I think this was now, assuming, of course, this was the human Ford that died, and this wasn't some host. This would be the most shocking death since Ned Stark in the first season of Game of Thrones, I would say, Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Ned Stark dying was a much bigger event, mostly because he was pretty much pegged as the lead in that show. Whereas Ford had a big role, but I wouldn't consider him the lead in Westworld.
Right. Well, I mean, again, there's a lot unlike Game of Thrones, at least in the first season, Westworld had a lot of very well-known performance artists. I mean, Ed Harris, Evan Rachel Wood, Thandie Newton, James Marsden. So, and again, they all had intervening stories, or interconnecting stories.
There is one thing that I read that Billy Simpson, who played the young man in black, confirmed that he hasn't been signed on for season 2. Whether or not that means he's definitely not going to be in it. Or he's going to be signed on a little bit later. He has come out in an interview and explained that. So possibility of no more younger man in black.
Honestly, though, Ryan, I think the younger man in black story has already concluded. So, I mean, if he didn't come back, I would be okay with that. But again, it's 2 years away removed. A lot can happen, or at least a year and a half away removed. So we're going to be, a lot can happen within that time frame.
Yeah.
So, I mean, again, we don't even know if
you have to consider that they film it probably 6 months before it's aired. At least 6 months, I imagine, to edit and reshoot things. Oh, there was one thing I wanted to talk about that we really haven't talked about at all, and that's the CGI that's used in this show, which is pretty sparing. But in this particular episode, I thought the CGI on Dolores's robotic body was really good.
That was a good surprise, especially to open the episode, Ryan.
Yeah, I thought
it was kind of freaky too, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a little weird, but it was animated. I think it was animated perfectly. The thing that I don't like is the CGI young Robert Ford face.
Really, because a lot of people actually praise that they were able to make a younger Robert Ford via CGI. They actually praise that as being done correctly. So that's an interesting point, Ryan.
Yeah, it's just like one little pinch of uncanny valley to it. And in this particular episode, I think that his head is too big. When he's walking down that hallway and there's this little skinny body with this big young Anthony Hopkins head on it. It was just like, Oh man, it had been okay up to that point, and then I saw it and I was like, man, why don't they just hire an actor that looks like Anthony Hopkins?
I'm going to have to relook at that, Ryan. But hey, let's be honest. Anthony Hopkins, from my understanding, is an incredibly intelligent individual. Maybe his brain was just too big for his head or for his body.
Yeah.
So think about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of goes like, you've seen Prometheus, right?
Yes, I have.
It's like, why didn't they
There's a sequel coming out for that this summer, by the way.
Yeah, I know. Why didn't they just hire an actor to play the older guy instead of CGIing. I don't even remember who it was. Was it
Guy Pearce?
Guy Pearce, yeah. Instead of CGIing Guy Pearce to make him look old, just hire an old guy.
Like who? You want to hire Michael Gambon or something?
Somebody that looks like Guy Pearce. Doesn't even have to look that much like Guy Pearce. It just has to have the same basic structure. And it just looks so more believable to have a real person in there, because you can just tell that it's fake. Like you can't not tell that it's fake. Like you don't look at, as good as some of the young Robert Ford CGI was, you don't look at that and think, oh, that's an actor playing a young Robert Ford. You think that that's them CGIing a young Anthony Hopkins on that.
I mean, Ryan, I'm gonna have to go back and take a look at this and see if hold on
a sec. The point I'm making is, when you watch that, you knew immediately it was CGI, right? You weren't fooled, were you?
I mean, again, I'd have to go back. I wasn't really.
I'm talking about the first time you saw it.
Oh, the first time I saw it, yeah, absolutely. I knew it was Anthony Hopkins. I mean,
yeah,
don't
you
get
knew
me
it was
wrong.
Fake, right?
Well, yeah, of course I did.
Of course.
But,
so then
I
it's
thought
not.
it was done in the
so
I
then
thought
it's
it was
not
done-
believable. It's not If you think if you look at it and you realize it's fake immediately, it's not believable. So it shouldn't have been used.
Okay, I see where you're coming from, Ryan. Yes, do not get me wrong. I do absolutely see what you're coming from. But again, you don't want to. I didn't necessarily. I thought it was still well done or better done than anything, than most other people who CGI stuff. I mean, I didn't think it was bad as Guy Pearce in Prometheus, or what they did with Michael Douglas in one of the Marvel movies. But
it's just like if you look at it and you don't immediately think that it's real, then it should be something different. That's just my take on it, because that's what, especially in a show like this where CGI is really not used that much, to use it in that way. Like, I understand like Lord of the Rings making Gollum CGI because you can't really get a person to do that and make it look realistic. I understand that kind of stuff, and it works there. But when you're just taking this tiny little bit of the story and kind of almost like saying, oh, look what we can do with CGI, it just doesn't make any sense to me, and it totally takes away from the realism of what they're trying to create.
Well, I see your point. No, I definitely see your point, Ryan. And yeah, maybe it would have been believable, but then again, maybe they couldn't find somebody who looked like Anthony Hopkins that they found believable. I'm just saying, I don't know. I'm not one of the casting agents. I'm not one of the producers of the show. I can't make these assumptions. Well,
I mean, they went with Billy Simpson to be a young Ed Harris, and they said that was okay. So their bar is pretty low.
Well, you know what Robert Ford did say, Ryan, in episode 9? He said something along the lines of, never put your faith in humanity, or because we're only human. Henceforth, humans make mistakes. We are not perfect. So
I guess so.
That can go along with the show as well, I guess.
All right. Well, I guess that's going to do it for the Set the Westworld on Fire for this season, for this year, for this probably year and a half. And yeah, I'm so looking forward to season 2 with up until this point it's just kind of like Game of Thrones that I'm really looking forward to, and now I have another show that I can look forward to. I don't watch too much TV, so when these shows pop up, it's kind of important to me.
Yeah, absolutely, Ryan. And for all you viewers out there, still continue to send in your questions, comments, and thoughts. Just because we're not going to be on the air for a little while doesn't mean that we won't answer your questions. We love to get we love to receive comments of all sorts. Even if you tell us we suck, we still appreciate it. But still keep your eyes and ears open, because we still may come back with another podcast on another show, Ryan, because there's a couple of shows you mentioned that seem pretty intriguing.
Yeah, keep in mind that what we do on the channel isn't just this podcast. There's a lot of other content that we have on here as well. So take a look at the channel, subscribe if you like this, and if you want to keep an eye on what we do in the future. And every week, every few days, there's a new video popping up on the channel. So take a look at that kind of stuff. Let us know what you think. And if you have any suggestions on what we can do next, or what the next show that we can tackle, just let us know and we'll see if it appeals to us. Just to leave it off like we always do, yeehaw!
Yeehaw! Yippee-ki-yay, motherfuckers.
Get along, little doggy.